Can an F-35 pilot fly an Apache on the first, second, third, or even fourth try? Let's find out.
3, 2, 1, flight off.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Monday. I'm Mover. Interesting story out of Utah. An F-35 pilot was on an orientation flight, and the qualified Apache pilot gave the F-35 pilot some time at the controls, and it didn't go well. So Fox 13 in Utah did an investigative report, and we're going to take a look at that and talk about it. It's a kind of a story near and dear to my heart because I'm a commercial helicopter pilot in addition to having flown the F-16 and F-18. So I was once the fighter pilot trying to hover, but this did not go that well.
Yeehaw! What do you think?
You got it.
Dude, that was awesome.
That's a lot of stuff.
Man, if I'd have given you a stick of gum, you'd have had that too.
So this is Fox 13 investigates how a colonel crashed a Utah Apache helicopter he wasn't qualified to fly. And so I wish I could find, I looked, I could not get the original Army investigative report. I don't know why they're all hidden behind FOIA now. It used to be you had a reading library and you could pretty much get any AIB report from any service, but they're hiding them now. So it's very hard to find. But this is from Nate Carlisle. When a Utah National Guard helicopter crashed earlier this year, it was under the control of a fighter jet pilot without the necessary qualifications. The February 12th accident is described in an investigative report that they obtained through public records request. So they had to do a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, which I think is silly. The crash happened during what's called an orientation flight to demonstrate the attack helicopter's capability for a colonel in the Air Force Reserves, an F-35 pilot. It's not unusual. We do FAM flights or all the time. So there's two different types of flights we did in the Air Force and Navy. You had the incentive flight, which was a dedicated flight. Like when I was at Homestead, we'd take a F-16D and we'd be single ship. And I'd brief the incentive flyer that, hey, this is your day. You earned it, whether it was from an award or some kind of public figure or whatever. So we'd take off, do an unrestricted climb, descend down, do a low level down to Key West, and then go to the airspace, go do a supersonic run, pull 9Gs so they could say they did that, and then do some aerobatics and then come back home. Pretty benign sortie, although for them, sometimes it wasn't, just because they haven't done it in a while. A FAM ride, which is a familiarization flight, is a mission, and they're just observing. And that's usually military members that have some reason to do a FAM ride. Like if a fighter pilot's coming out from another community, so like if we're fighting Eagles, for example, and the Eagle pilot wants to get in the backseat of a Viper, that's a FAM ride because they're not qualified in the jet, but we're not going to change really the mission that we're doing. Cadets often got FAM rides because they wouldn't be dedicated. Did those a lot, the T-38. There are all kinds of things. So I don't know which one of these orientation. This sounds like it was dedicated. So I don't know what the criteria was, but it's not unusual for us to say, hey, you want to come fly with us? We'll show you what we can do. Because it's a good way to learn capabilities of other communities in doing so. So this is not completely unusual. All right. Flying a jet is not the same as flying a helicopter. Really? You had to say that. And the investigator said that was key to the crash. Before the flight, the colonel's Apache experience consisted of about 35 minutes in the sim.
Welcome to the future, lads. Descend the stairway, turn right at the first platform, enter the big black box, make ready for war.
And that experience was probably going out, getting familiar with the cockpit, getting familiar with a couple controls in case you needed to do certain things, because it's easier to show somebody at 1G in a simulator than it is at, in flight, in moving, in motion.
Riding in the gunner seat of this aircraft at 150 knots through the treetops is like having your ass strapped to the nose of a bullet.
35 minutes is not a lot, but that wasn't, the intent was not to get him qualified in 35 minutes. It was just kind of, hey, here's where everything is. Do you have any questions? Here's how we get in the helicopter. Here's how we get out of the helicopter, all that stuff.
Put your hands here, here, and there. Put your feet here, 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 and here, and here.
step here or there.
The flight in the Muriel helicopter was a 90-minute flight. On a return to West Jordan Airport, the colonel, which I wonder if he was a full bird or a lieutenant colonel, tried 3 times to hover and land, according to the investigative report. Each time, the warrant officer in the cockpit had to assume the controls.
Preston, do you see that big honking airplane killing rock out there?
Yes, goddammit, I see it! What the hell do you want me to do with it?
The colonel tried a 4th time. And at this point, I hate the way this is written because they cut out some important details. In a moment of panic and due to his great unfamiliarity with the helicopter flight controls, an investigator wrote, the colonel reverted to his fixed-wing training and applied downward movement. See, they cut out downward movement. I bet it had to be to the collective. I mean, the cyclic, you go downward movement, it's just going to start flying forward, especially if you're at a hover power. But if you drop the collective, that will cause you to lose lift, essentially. The motion was not proper input in a rotor wing aircraft. So this is poorly written, and I would love to see the actual report to see what flight control inputs they did. So the Apache, and we've talked to Casmo, we've had him on the show, we've flown it in DCS, is a very automated helicopter. There's a lot of assist with the flight control system, and it's not a terribly difficult helicopter compared to some other helicopters, like not like a Robbie, an R-22 or something like that. Like any other helicopter, you have to get the flight controls right, and fixed wing pilots are typically the most dangerous when they transition from fixed wing to rotary wing because a lot of the habits don't carry over at all. Like every power input needs some kind of subsequent input in the anti-torque pedals, although a lot of these have a stability augmentation system that dampens that out where you don't really need it as much, but you still have to be cognizant of the limitations of the helicopter. When you do a go around in a fighter or whatever, you push the throttle forward. Well, that motion forward is the same as going down. And if you go down, like I said, you descend or you lose that collective. If you want to climb, you pull up, which is the opposite of a throttle on a fighter because you pull back. Now, an F-35 is an incredibly automated aircraft that does a lot of things for you and makes flying easy. All the fighters are like that. The F-16 was like that. The F-18 was like that because flying is secondary to employing, dropping bombs, whatever. So it's a very easy aircraft to fly, just basically, not to employ, but to fly. So you don't have the same level of proficiency and currency with just basic stick and rudder skills as you might have flying like an Aranca Champ or a Cessna because it's 2 different worlds. Would that have mattered here? I don't know. Probably not. But it's worth noting that, fighter flying is about employing and tactics and not about the actual basic flying because that's 2 different things. The jets are made to be easily flown. The Apache rotated and fell from about 10 feet above the ground before the chief warrant officer could grab the controls. So why would it rotate? Well, if you've got your torque pedal set for a certain power setting, right? Left pedal as you increase collective, right pedal as you decrease. So if you don't counter that and you do it real fast, the helicopter's gonna rotate. It's gonna yaw, if you will. It's gonna spin about that axis. It was about 10 feet above the ground before the chief warrant officer could grab the controls. Ew. Why was he not on the controls already? It's terrible. Warrant officer sustained minor injuries. The colonel sustained more serious, although non-life-threatening injuries that required surgical intervention and rehabilitation. Wow. I wonder if that's service-related. It's got to be because he had to be on a military status to do it. So, orientation flights are common. Apache pilots have given rides to Hungarian soldiers. But the investigators found the fault with the chief warrant officer, saying the overconfidence led to inadequate aircraft control, flight management, inadequate altitude selection with an unqualified person on the helicopter flight controls. I don't know about that one. So hovering in a helicopter, because I've seen this before, and this is, mover's opinion only. Yes, you can go hover at altitude. Is it safer? Yeah, I mean, you're farther away from things that you can hit, but it comes with its own risks. hovering at low altitude, you have ground effect. It's easier to hover, takes less power to hover. It's not as, it can't get away from you as drastically as an out of ground effect hover. An out of ground effect hover, if you get into this high sink rate, high descent rate, you can end up in what's called vortex ring state. And now you're doing an escape maneuver, which you may or may not have enough altitude or wherewithal to get out of. You're trained for it, but can you get out of that? So there's a risk in an OGE hover, which is an out of ground effect hover. Should they have tried that first? Probably. Could they have been doing this low to the ground? I don't see the problem with it as long as he is on the flight controls with him. And I'll talk about that here when we get to the wrap up. The report also noted problems with the chain of command. Noted the 2022 crash of the 2 Utah National Guard helicopters at Snowboard Resort found a similar leadership failure in the Apache crash. Commanders were not relaying and enforcing standard operating procedures. Seems like a common trend across the DoD. The Utah Guard did not respond to that. Could be nationwide implications for the crash. Report recommended the National Guard Bureau Pentagon Office recess orientation flights in Apache units. That sounds like, one guy shits himself. We all have to wear diapers. What is the cause of this? God, I'd love to read the report, but it's always a Swiss cheese model, and it's always, a number of layers that lead to this. First, if you have somebody unqualified on the controls, you're on the controls with them. There's no point, especially the fourth time where they've already demonstrated that they can't do it, should you be completely hands off. And so that reaction time should not have existed because you should have already been on the controls with them to make sure that that wasn't about to happen. So that to me is the root cause right there. You're not on the controls with them, not even guarding the flight controls. I mean, even in an airliner, I guard the flight controls when the pilot flying is flying. That's just crew 101. And it's not hard to do because it's not like there's, you have to literally move controls or anything. One's in the back seat, one's in the front seat. You're just on with them and, light touch the way you can grab it and go. That's part one. Part two is how many tries did you give the guy, right? So I don't know of anybody that would be that patient in a non-student environment because it's in an orientation flight. It doesn't matter. Like if this guy gets it or doesn't get it, it doesn't matter. That's not the point.
Climb, take it up. I got it. No, sir, negative. This flight is terminated. I have the controls, Mr. Preston.
After 2 tries, well, for me, it'd be 1 try. You get 1 try. Okay, it didn't work out. See you later. We're going to do this thing. And I've seen that before. We did a lot of these in the T-38. You never give them a chance to land. You give them 1 try to do a maneuver and they can't get it, or they do it in a dangerous manner that you're like, hey, this is not good. You go, okay, well, you tried. See you later. Never 4 tries. That's just crazy. And then the final thing is trying in the landing environment. Now, I just talked about this in the 38 or in the F-16 or the F-18, I would never give them the chance to land the airplane. Like that was never, takeoff and landing, I would always do. In a helicopter, is that different? Yes. So I've been here, right? I was the fighter pilot that was trying to fly a helicopter. When I went out in 2019 and on invitation did a video with the Harrison County Sheriff's Office, I had no helicopter experience except for maybe, an hour in DCS. So it was very similar, right? I'd flown the Apache in DCS, not the OH-58, not with a collective, just with my Warthog. And the second time I went out there with Stephanie and did that interview, she let me try to hover, and I did. But she was guarding the flight controls the whole time. Her hands were on the flight controls so she could take it at a moment's notice. We weren't at high altitude because, again, I don't think that's any safer in a helicopter being in an out of ground effect hover. But we were in an open area and she was guarding the flight controls. So, she was ready to assume control because I was not qualified. And I did hover, and it did set off a bug that I ended up becoming a commercial helicopter pilot after that. But still, it was, I don't disagree with the, hey, let's try that. Approach and landing, they never let me do. I mean, I think that's a different thing altogether because helicopter approaches look vastly different from aircraft approaches. The glide path is different. The descent rates are different. Everything is different. In a fixed wing aircraft, you're talking 750 feet a minute, 800 feet a minute on a 3-degree glide path. On a helicopter, you really don't want to be over that 300 feet a minute because, again, you start getting into vortex ring state, or if it's high altitude like Utah, you might get with settle with power or something like that. So you don't want to be in these slow speed, high descent rate situations. That's not what happened here. I think he was maybe trying to do a go around and drop the collective, and there's the end of that. So yeah, that's non-standard. Now, as far as who takes the blame, unless there's some knee-jerk reaction, I don't see a scenario where the F-35 pilot has any culpability in this, because when you are not qualified in the aircraft, the person that signs for the aircraft commander, is the one that takes full responsibility unless you do something illegal. And by that, I mean, unless the F-35 pilot was found to have just, wrestled the flight controls and done something to try to intentionally crash, which is not what happened here, according to a report, that he has no responsibility. And once he's cleared to fly, it will not affect him flying the F-35. I think I've seen some people ask that, oh, he's never has nothing to do with that. The warrant officer that signed for the aircraft and was supposed to be the instructor in this is 100% to blame. When you are instructing someone and they are not qualified in whatever you're doing, guess what? You're the one that signed for it, and you're the one that's going to take the fall for it. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be with that. I'm sure there's some discipline. And then finally, the leadership stuff. We've seen this. We talked about it with the B-1 mishap. We talked about it a little bit with the Osprey mishap in Japan. There is a lot of this accountability stuff with just leadership in general. So it's not surprising to me to see this in the Army too, because I think it's DoD wide, and I think it's a systematic issue. But it's good that they're calling it out, because I think that's what needs to happen, is that we call it out and we look at kind of who's being held accountable at the leadership levels and how they're enforcing standards, and how we're dealing with the do more with less mentality, which I don't think we should be. I think we need more. We need to do more with more. But the last piece, though, I don't agree with, is the Guard Bureau looking at orientation flights, because that's ridiculous. This incident was not because they did an orientation flight. This incident was because this person should not have trusted an F-35 pilot, and this person should not be doing orientation flights without their hands on the flight controls. Multiple approaches. I mean, that's just dumb. So there's no need. I hate when I see a report or I see something and something goes wrong, and the knee-jerk reaction is, we're just going to, change them all forever. And it's like, well, okay, well, this is the only time this has happened. So why are we, noted, well, we'll fix it for the next time. So anyway, I don't know. I'm not an Army guy, so maybe that's different. But I see a lot of Army stuff in the Air Force, and that's an Air Force thing. To just knee-jerk reaction and, throw the baby out with the bathwater just because one thing happened that we didn't like. But it does suck. We lost an Apache, and obviously the F-35 pilot being injured sucks too. Both of them, but F-35 being seriously injured. Hopefully he'll be able to get back to flying Fat Amy. And hopefully they'll continue doing Apache orientation rides, because, it's good. It's a good thing to do. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you think should have happened, or what you think did happen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've got some deep intel that I don't know about. So let me know. But hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. See you next time.